Okay, still on 1.4, we're going to go over 16 and 17 from Ready, Set, Go. They're asking you to find f of g and g of f. Okay, so this again is gnarly substitution. I keep saying that over and over again. It's just substitution that they want you to do. Instead of this, please put a this. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy f of x over here just so I can write right underneath it. So x plus 2 quantity cubed, right? And then I'm going to find f of g. So that's the first one I'm going to find. So I'm going to go f of, and then I'm going to put g of x inside. They want g of x to be substituted for x, right? So I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to substitute it here. That makes sense? Okay, so what's going to happen is every time I see an x, I'm going to put a g of x instead. Okay, every time I see an x, I'm going to put a g of x instead. And in fact, instead of putting g of x, I'm going to put what g of x's other name is. So if you think about this, g of x is like the name of the function, and this is what the function does, right? So maybe, I don't know, what would be a good point? Like, so maybe you've named, I don't know, you've named something, I don't know, you've named your computer. You named your computer g of x. But what your computer actually does is connect to the internet and all this other stuff. So instead of putting the name here, we're going to put the function in here. Does that make sense? So I'm going to copy exactly what it says to do. So here is a parentheses for my f plus 2 parentheses cubed. Notice here, everything is the same. Parentheses, parentheses, plus, plus, 2, 2, parentheses, cubed. But Ms. Johnson, you left a space there. I did, because instead of putting that x there, right, instead of putting that x there, I'm going to put g of x instead. And I'm going to use g of x's function, the actual, like what it does function. And I'm going to put that in there instead. So I'm going to put the cube root of x minus 2. The cube root of x minus 2. Now, and then all I'm going to do is start simplifying this to make sure that I understand what I'm doing. And so if you notice, you'll start seeing, oh, look, minus 2 plus 2. Ms. Johnson, look, that's so cool. They cancel. Yes, they cancel to be 0, correct. So then here I am left with still the parentheses cubed, still that g of x, that little part in there, because nothing canceled that, right? And then you look, you're like, hey, Ms. Johnson, doesn't cube root and cube undo each other? Yes, they are inverses of each other. So they also kind of undo each other. So Ms. Johnson, what am I left with? I'm left with x. So you, Ms. Johnson, you're saying f of g of x is just x? Yeah, you take these crazy two equations, you plug them into each other, and look, you just get x. Now your brain should be thinking, oh man, Ms. Johnson talked about this. When it simplifies to x, something happens. Yes, that is correct. Okay. Now I'm going to do the other way, g of f of x. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy g of x. So g of x is equal to the cube root of x minus 2, right? And then now I want, someone says, hey, Ms. Johnson, can you do g of f of x? Absolutely. So I'm going to take g of x and I'm going to put f of x as the input. Right? I'm plugging in f of x. So everything here is going to stay exactly the same except for that x. Does that make sense? Everything in there is going to stay exactly the same except for that x. So I'm going to copy everything in that same color. I don't know if you guys appreciate this, but I'm doing it in colors just so you can kind of see what happens. Right? So the cube root stays, the cube root stays. The x is not going to stay. He's going to be substituted out. The minus is going to stay. The 2 is going to stay. Now, instead of f of x this time, I'm going to put, instead of x, I'm going to put f of x. I'm going to be putting f of x, right? I'm going to be putting f of x over here, right? So I'm going to copy this guy right here, Ms. Johnson. Yes, absolutely. So you're going to copy it. It's going to look like this. X plus 2, parentheses, x plus 2 quantity cubed, right? And so if you look, all that lighter pinky stuff stayed exactly the same. Cube root, minus, minus 2, 2. The only thing that changed was x. So if you think about substitution, like I'm a classic person that goes to a restaurant and I don't like certain things. So I'll say, hey, instead of bacon, can you put avocado instead? So instead of bacon, can you put avocado instead? Doesn't change the rest of the sandwich. It doesn't. It doesn't change the rest of the sandwich. The rest of the sandwich is still the same. You still have bread, you still have turkey, you still have lettuce, tomato, onion, whatever, right? I just, instead of bacon, can you please put avocado? And they're like, sure, no problem. Okay, so here, all you're gonna do is simplify. So the very first thing that I see simplifies. Now don't go like cancel crazy. My students do this thing where they go cancel crazy and they start slashing out things. You cannot cancel the -2 with the +2 right now. Okay, you can't. Number one, -2 is outside the radical. Number two, +2 is not only inside the radical, but he's inside the cube and he's inside the parentheses. So I can't +2 -2 right now because that's not true. I got to get the stuff outside. So if you notice, the cube root and the cube will cancel. Right? So you're left with this x + 2 - 2. And you'll notice, oh, these make a 0, right? So now you're just left with x. So you should be thinking, oh man, I remember this, Miss Johnson. I remember you saying something when I do f of g of x and it equals to x and g of f of x and it equals to x. So these two things together, because g of f and f of g both equal to x, this implies a very important lesson, which is this implies they are, oops, I don't know how to spell R, hold on. It's a tough word, try again. They are inverses of each other. This is very important, okay? We don't plug in just to plug in, right? I'm not like, hey, can you plug in fog and goff for me? That's what they call it sometimes, fog, goff. Can you just do that for me? It's not important that you do it. It's important for you to read the results. So the results here say, because f of g of x is equal to x, and g of f of x is equal to x, this implies they're inverses of each other. So they have a very special relationship. So if you've been paying attention to what that actually means graphically, which that's what we've been talking about graphically. Graphically, these two have a very special relationship, and I'll graph it for you super quick. So this is going to say, I think I'll actually put y equals because that's proper. Parentheses x + 2, and you should already know. You should already know what these are going to look like, right? Y equals the cube root. Is that? Oh, look at me. I didn't know that was cube root of x, and then get that -2 outside. These two have a very special relationship. We already proved it algebraically. We proved algebraically. Look, they're inverses of each other. And now I can prove, oh, where'd it go? Where did you go, Desmos? Here you are. And now I proved that they are mirror images of each other off of the line y equals x. Right? Do you all see that? Like, it's like a mirror image of each other, right? So it's really strong when you can explain something algebraically, when you can explain it graphically, and when we can explain it in words. These two undo each other. What you did here, we undid here, and what you did here, I undid here. Right? So it's really, really strong. So the same thing you're going to do here, you're going to plug f of g and g of f in. Go ahead and pause the video and I'll show you the solution in a second. But pause the video and try this on your own. Okay, so now that you had a chance to try 17, we're going to do 17 as well. Probably in this space because I write really big. So I'm going to copy these over here. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy f of x is equal to 3/4 x + 6. And then they're asking for f of g of x, right? So that means, oh, it's not catching up. So that means that I need to copy the outer function. So I could talk about the outer function, and I don't know if I've ever said specifically what an outer function is. Outer function is the guy that is all the way on the outside. So f in this case, and over here it would be g because he's all the way outside. So the very first thing I do, I don't even pay attention to this x right now. I'm just going to copy what I see. So 3/4. I'm going to use a big parentheses right there because I know I'm going to have to put g of x in there, and then +6, right? Ms. Johnson, why are you using that parentheses right there? I use that parentheses right there because I want it to be a placeholder of where I'm going to put my g of x. He is going to sit right here. Sense? And so then I'm going to take g of x and I'm going to put it inside of there. And so if you notice again, this g of x is going to go in here, in here. This is my g of x that I'm going to use. And I'm using that instead of x because that's what they told me. They told me, hey, instead of putting x, put g of x. Instead of putting x, put g of x. Okay, so are you, I got it. It's like a little laggy, hold on. Okay, so you can imagine what I'm gonna put in here once my computer catches up. You can imagine what I'm gonna put in here. So what I'm gonna put in here is what g of x is, which in this case, it's all of this stuff right here. It's all of this stuff right here, and it's not catching up. Give me a second. Okay, so again, I'm going to put the g of x in here, which is all of this stuff, right? All of that stuff. So, oh, that's why, because I highlighted the wrong one. Haha. Okay, so I'm gonna put all that stuff in there. So that is that color. So 4 parentheses x minus 6 all over 3. And then you can kind of already see that you have a bunch of stuff canceling. It's slow. It is really slow. So you can see that a bunch of stuff cancels. And if you can kind of imagine, oh, there it goes. These 3s divide out to be 1. These 4s divide out to be 1. And so I'm left with x minus 6 plus 6, which again, that's just x. So f of g of x is x. So yay. Now, notice, my computer is going to catch up to me one day. Notice that you only have f of g of x being x. You don't have this other side. So when you do this, it doesn't tell you that they're inverses of each other. Okay, it does tell you something, but it doesn't tell you they're inverses of each other. Okay, so then now I'm going to switch it. I'm going to go Goff. So I'm going to go g of f. Oops, not, I just want to do g of x. So I'm going to copy g of x, which is 4 parentheses x minus 6 over 3. And then I'm going to go g of f of x, except for I'm just going to use that as a little shell. And it's not catching up to me. Okay, so instead of putting that x there, they really wanted me to put an f of x. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing down. Oops. I'm going to copy this whole thing down with the exception, I should probably give myself some more room there. With the exception of that x, and I'm going to put this extra set of parentheses here for my x, like my placeholder. So in this case, I'm going to be putting f of x inside there. So I'm going to take all of this stuff and I'm gonna, let's see, let me try to erase this guy. I don't like that. Instead of this guy, let's see. Instead of this guy, I'm gonna put f of x, which is gonna sit in there. And f of x is this guy over here. So that's what I'm gonna put in there. Okay. It's going to catch up one day, I promise. So here I put in, inside here, I'm going to be putting in 3/4 x plus 6, right? So when I put 3/4 x plus 6, you'll start to notice stuff. Again, don't go cancel crazy, right? Your plus 6 and your minus 6 don't get to play together because this minus 6 is outside your parentheses. And then the plus 6 that you will see is inside the parentheses. So in order for it to come out of the parentheses, you actually need to get rid of that multiplication there, right? So if you kind of look at it, hold on a second. Oh, hold on a second. I'm sorry. I said that the plus 6 and minus 6 don't get to play together because we have to multiply this 4 first, and that's not true because this 4 is being held by this parenthesis, but that's inside of it. So if we take out this parenthesis, the dark blue one, it would look something like this, right? 4 parentheses minus 6. And then if you look, that plus 6 and that minus 6 would be a 0. So plus 6 minus 6, that's 0. And then now we can do this 4/3 and a 3/4, which those would cancel, then those would cancel. So we are left with x. So because we have Goff and Fogg, oops, of x, that implies that these two, meaning these two are inverses, right? And so because they're inverses, you can imagine what the picture looks like. They'll be mirror images of each other, just like they were over here. Okay. So then for this part here, they're asking you to now, because remember we graphed this already earlier, they want you to choose which of these 4 graphs match this graph. And that's actually this one right here. So here you would just write number 16. So here you would just write 16 and then you're kind of done. So it'll appear there. All right. Have a great day.